So welcome back, everybody. Nice to have you. And we are completing our short series of Women in Torah on the four mothers, the four matriarchs of the Jewish people. So let's dive in. Okay, we've covered Sarah, we've covered Rivka, Rebecca. Last week we talked about Leah, who we called the fourth matriarch. And today we're doing Rachel, who is technically the third matriarch, because she really was the one who Jacob was meant to be with originally, right? So when we talk about Rachel, we're going to see like her overarching quality is the quintessential Jewish mother. Like she is the Jewish mother, okay? So just to recap, she is the sister of Leah. She is the daughter of Lavan, and she was always destined to marry Jacob, her cousin. And as we saw last week, Jacob married Leah first. There was the whole switcheroo. And Leah had children immediately, which really secured her in the first wife position, right? So she became like the first wife of Jacob. And therefore, what we're going to see is that Rachel really struggles through many emotions in her lifetime. I mean, we can imagine being Rachel, who knows that she has this destiny, and then for reasons that she goes along with, switches the destiny, and she kind of takes a back seat to her life, right? So that has to be difficult. So we first meet Rachel, it's interesting, when she is outside tending to her father's sheep. Okay, we can see here on the screen, Rachel came with her father's flock, for she was a shepherdess. So this is our first introduction to who she is. And when Jacob first sees Rachel at the well, when he comes to Haran, he's left his family's house, he's running for his life, he's going towards his uncle Lavan's in order to get away from his brother who wants to kill him. And Jacob comes to the well at Haran, and he notices a few things about her. One of the things that he notices is the Torah tells us he sees his mother Rebecca, in Rachel. And the commentaries say perhaps it's that she has a similar personality to his mother, or she looks like his mother. I mean, really, his mother, his mother is Rachel's aunt, right? They're first cousins. So it makes sense that there's a familiarity. And here we see that Rachel is introduced as a shepherdess, meaning she's taking care of the sheep. And actually, her name means a small sheep in Hebrew. There's clearly a connection with Rachel and sheep. So what is it about being a shepherd, right? If we think about some of the other leaders and prophets and the patriarchs of the Jewish people, they also were shepherds. Moses, right, was the greatest prophet of the Jewish people, of all of humanity, really. And he is also described, he works as a shepherd in the fields. So what is it? We have to ask ourselves, like, why is she described in this way? Why is her name associated with a sheep? What is it about a shepherd's job that's important for us to understand? And what does it tell us about her character? And why is it that the greatest leaders of the Jewish people were shepherds? King David also, he was out with the sheep in the field before he became the king, as an example. So a shepherd, if we think about the job of a shepherd has to rally a large population of animals, of sheep, and move them in one direction together. A shepherd has to have an extreme amount of patience and inner strength. They have to be quiet, not to scare the sheep, right? Not to scare the flock, to keep everybody together. There has to be this calmness about them, that the sheep follow their lead in a very calm manner, okay? And also they spend all of their time really in the fields. So they definitely are introspective. They're thinkers. They're spiritual because they're out there really on their own in solitude with the animals. And as we're going to see when we learn about Rachel's life, it's going to become clear why she is introduced to us in this way, associated as a shepherdess. So as soon as we meet her, we are told that she was beautiful of appearance and of form. It's interesting because in comparison to Leah's description, Leah was described as having weak eyes. Rachel is described as being beautiful of appearance and form. So there's quite a remarkable difference there. Rachel seems to be, as we're going to learn about her, someone who is comfortable in the world. She's beautiful, but she's realistic, and she has a go-with-the-flow personality. To be a shepherd means she likes the outdoors, she loves taking care of animals, and she really is a natural leader. And Jacob sees that she has this synchronicity between the body and the soul. Like he recognizes this peaceful calmness about her, and he really recognizes a true partner for himself in her. And we're going to see that Rachel will represent the revealed aspects of this world, which is opposite to Leah's hiddenness that we spoke about in the last class. So Jacob immediately loves Rachel. The Talmud tells us that Rachel's most outstanding quality is that she has this calmness to her. When Rachel gives Leah the secret signs that were meant for herself and for Jacob, she does this because she really wants to save her sister from humiliation. She is a very selfless person. To be able to take position as second or last of the wives, she becomes the mother last. She's really always concerned about the feelings of others. She's compassionate. She would not let her sister be humiliated, even when it meant that she could not marry Jacob herself. So really, though, Rachel and Jacob were the perfect match. When we think about Jacob's main trait, his main trait was it's described as tiferet, like beauty, but it really also means balance, like not an outward beauty, which he had, but beauty. Balance. The ability to take two extremes and create a balanced approach to life. And this is who Jacob was. He took his grandfather Abraham's kindness, like extreme chesed and kindness, and his father's extreme discipline and strength, and he was a perfect balance of the two. And so Rachel's compassion and her easygoing manner were really a perfect match for Jacob's mission to bring spirituality into the physical world. So Jacob worked for 7 years so that Rachel's father would give permission for the marriage. And we know that the father tricked him and replaced Leah with Rachel, Leah instead of Rachel. But this was with Rachel's permission and her knowledge. And so Jacob marries Leah. Jacob doesn't fault Rachel. I mean, this is another question we could ask. So Jacob finds out he's married to the other sister, and he still loves Rachel and still wants her to be his wife. He still sees that there's a destiny. He doesn't fault her. There's not like an argument with them. He understands why she did what she did, and he's able to do that because of the type of person she is. When you're a certain type of person who's always looking out for others, who's selfless, who's compassionate, you get judged in that way. So it was understandable to Jacob why she did it. And so he works another 7 years to marry Rachel. So what is it about Rachel that makes her so righteous? And what can we learn from her life? Okay. So Rachel was silent when her father gave her sister to Jacob on the wedding night. It doesn't mean that she was a quiet person. It's a quality that we actually should all try to possess. So the secret to the relationship between Jacob and Rachel is that they were complementary to each other. And Rachel embodies silence, while Jacob embodies speech. Rachel is defined as holding back her words and desires in order to create space for God. Okay, so she holds back in order to create space. Where Jacob is really defined by the words of the Torah and the physical speech that fills a space with God. So she creates space by withdrawing somewhat, and Jacob fills that space. Our sages explain that Rachel was the main force of the home because her silence is the foundation of which speech is built. So what do we mean by that? That silence is the foundation on which speech is built. So sometimes something that seems to not be real is really the foundation that everything is built on. So for example, when we look at a building, we don't see the foundation of the concrete underground, right? But it's the foundation that's holding up the building. Without holding back and staying silent and making a space for God or space for others, even, everything that we said would be meaningless. Rachel's silence is the foundation for Jacob's speech. And that was the secret to their marriage. They had a perfect balance. One filled the other. So perhaps we could all learn a lesson from this in our partnerships, in our friendships, that silence, and I think we all, I definitely need to learn from this, that silence is often the best tool. Rachel's descendants, we see in her descendant line, also have this quality. Benjamin, Rachel's second child, the last of the 12 sons, was silent when Joseph, his immediate brother, was sold into slavery and thrown in the pit because he understood that some things should not be said. He understood that the Jewish people needed to go into Egypt, like Joseph had to go first and they would follow because it was their destiny, which is another class if you're interested. But he also understood the extreme pain he would cause his father if he told him the truth of what happened. So he held back in telling his father the truth about his brother Joseph. Another descendant further down the line from the tribe of Benjamin, from Rachel, is King Saul, the first king of the Jewish people. He was actually crowned king in a private ceremony. And then he returned home and he didn't tell anybody that he had become the king. He was waiting until it was the right time and he was instructed to take a step up. Saul understood that the kingship of the Jewish people truly did not belong to him, but it really belonged to God. He was just the vessel. And he was a man of great humility, which is an important quality for a leader to have. Moses also had great humility. And so what made him the perfect candidate to be the first king of Israel was exactly that. He knew when to be quiet and to stay humble. Esther is another example down the line from the tribe of Benjamin, from Rachel, which I have a whole class on Esther if you're interested. But Esther had this special quality. She knew when to keep quiet when she was in the palace and not allowing anyone to find out that she was Jewish as the queen of Persia. So we see that there's a connection with the descendants of Rachel and this quality of holding back and creating space. And what's interesting is speech is really a connection between the physical and the spiritual. The translation of our spiritual reality becomes physical when we speak. In its highest form, speech can be used to teach Torah, to give words of kindness, to give comfort. And in its lowest form, we could use speech in so many negative, destructive ways that I think we all know about. So silence, the opposite of speech, in its highest form, is actually creating a connection and a space for God. It's not an absence of words or a lack of action, but it's holding back that is the foundation of holy speech. It's waiting and thinking before processing and speaking words. So Rachel tells us or teaches us that there's value in silence, and that when we are frustrated, as she surely was frustrated over and over and over again in her life and then in her marriage, instead of bursting with anger and ego, which most of us jump to because it's innate in us, right? We should try to be like Rachel, to be introspective and to look for the bigger picture and to create space. By remaining silent, she is saving her sister. She is saving Jacob, and she is saving her father from embarrassment. And ultimately, she's saving herself from embarrassment also. So there's a difference between the idea, because we kept saying like Rachel is destined to be with Jacob, right? There's a difference between the idea of fate and the idea of destiny. In English, like we can say them and we kind of mean the same thing, but I want to kind of differentiate between them. When we use the word fate, what we're really saying is that whatever happens, it happens. Like it's just fate. It just happens. It's more of a happenstance. Okay, like it's a little bit more of a random way of something happening. Like it's a coincidence. Okay. And really the word fate or faith even, there's no word for faith in the Hebrew language. It's not a Jewish concept to like think it's coincidence or blindly believe something. We would rather use the word destiny. Destiny is more of a future-oriented idea, which is a very Jewish concept, meaning that God creates a situation specifically for each person in order for us to grow in our character and our connection with God. Meaning nothing in this world is random. There is always a reason for it. So why am I bringing this up? Because for most of their marriage, Rachel is barren, not able to have children, while Leah, as we saw last week, is very fertile. She's having baby after baby after baby. If we use the word fate, fate would have said to Rachel, oh, well, you were born barren. It's too bad. Oh, well. But destiny would say, the Torah value or lens would say, God created this problem for you for a reason. What can you do about it? What, like I like to say, what ladder do you need to climb? Like, what do you have to learn from this? So when Rachel saw, I have it here on the screen, when she saw she could not have children, she became, it says here, she became envious of her sister. And she says to Jacob, give me children or I shall die. So now this is confusing. We just described a quiet, introspective, humble type of personality, calm, compassionate. She changes her destiny to help her sister from embarrassment. She takes a step back. She creates space. And now she's saying to her husband, give me children or I shall die. And she's described as being envious of her sister. It seems like a total flip. And really, we are forbidden from being jealous. I mean, it's one of the 10 commandments that comes later. Now, the word jealousy, again, not a good translation from Hebrew. There's not a good word for it. Jealousy, when we use that word, we mean that we want something that someone else has, like we want it from that person. So this is forbidden. To covet, meaning like I want what they have and I don't want them to have it. I want to have it. So this is forbidden because when somebody is jealous in that way, they're removing God from the picture, because based on Torah tradition and Jewish values, every person has exactly what they need in their own life. And God gives us each what we individually each need. So if someone says, I want what that person has, then we're essentially saying, God didn't give me enough, or God made a mistake, or God gave them too much. That was an error. So that we can understand, right? So still, the question is, if we're forbidden from being jealous, then how is Rachel jealous here? And how could she be described as one of the most righteous women of the Jewish people? Now, the Torah doesn't make mistakes, right? So what is this? So here's where we learn that there is one exception to jealousy. We are allowed to be jealous of the Torah and mitzvahs of others. In the Talmud, it says, the jealousy of those who learn Torah increases wisdom in the world. If you're jealous in order to gain more knowledge, then that desire, that jealousy will ultimately lead the jealous person, okay, to bring more goodness into the world. Like if I'm jealous of somebody's knowledge in a certain area, okay, in this case, specifically when it has to do with Torah and mitzvahs, and I'm jealous of how they could be so knowledgeable. So what's that going to do for me? That's going to encourage me to take on learning. So that's great. That is the one exception. The Torah and mitzvahs are not about what God gave us, but about what we could give God. Like, what are we capable of? So Rashi tells us that when it says she became envious or jealous of her sister, she was jealous of her sister's good deeds. She saw that Leah was more righteous than her. And she understood that that's why Leah had so many children by that point. She knew that Leah's prayers and the way she was mothering and the way she had grown and really improved herself, she understood that that's why Leah had children. So she was jealous of the positive improvement of her sister. She was envious of her mitzvahs, of her good deeds. So this is permissible. And this is what makes someone more righteous when we are trying to grasp onto something to improve ourselves. So while she's in pain from not having children, she looked to her sister and she understood that her own barrenness, her own ability to not have children must be, this is how righteous she was, that it must be because she had something she had to work on herself, and this was part of her own destiny, as hard as it was for her. So she looks to her sister in envy, but envy of how righteous her sister was. And she wants to imitate her sister. She wants to be righteous like her sister. So she realizes, oh, I have work to do. I can't just, it's not coming to me. And it didn't come to Leah either. She had to work for it. So it's not a jealousy of wanting to take her sister's possessions. And it's not a jealousy of ill intent. It's one of motivation for her own growth. And this is not only permitted by the Torah, but encouraged. We are encouraged to want to be doing more mitzvahs like someone else. So Rachel says to Jacob, we still haven't attacked the last part, right? Give me children or I shall die. So Rachel tells Jacob, give me children or I will die. And she suggests, like she says it in a way of like we need to have children. You need to have children. So she says to herself, okay, I've got to grow beyond myself. And I'm going to think, what can I do with my situation? So she suggests to her husband that he have children with Bilhah, her maidservant, and she would then become like a surrogate mother to the child. So similar, she learned this from Sarah, from Jacob's grandmother, right? And Rachel displays again selflessness and sacrifice in order to build a relationship with her husband and take part in building the Jewish people. So she steps back, she creates a space for Bilhah to become a mother, and she will help partner in there. So when Rachel responds that Bilhah will have the child, when she says that to Jacob, she's really learning from Sarah, and she really has to humble herself even more in order to invest in the long-term mission like her grandmother, like Sarah. She learns from her sister and from being barren that in order to receive anything in life, we have to ask for it, and then we have to work to achieve it. We can't just say to God, give me this. Please, can you give me this? We have to do our work. We have to walk the walk. And she understands that she had to fill her life in another way because she wasn't able to have children. So she chooses to work on herself, and she invites her maidservant into the family home. When Bilhah gives birth, Rachel says, God has judged me and heard my voice. She accepts God's judgment that not everything is as we might choose it to be. So she really explains to us that even though we want something a certain way, it's not always going to work out the way we want. She sees when Dan is born, the first son of Bilhah, that his birth was a gift and that he would be one of the tribes of Israel. And she understands that her prayer and her growth and her action will be enough to fill the pain and the void of not having her own child. So things in our lives don't always work out the way we want or the way we'd hoped. But like Rachel, we have to recognize that in of itself is the message, that perhaps we can learn from our disappointments, and what we're learning is even greater than achieving what we thought we wanted. Rachel saw clearly that she would also be the mother to Bilhah's children, and she would help raise them, and that her growth in even getting there was a reward in of itself. And so Bilhah has two children, Dan and Naphtali. So Dan represents Rachel's struggle to really be introspective. And Naphtali represents her learning from her sister. It says here, a faithful contest I waged with my sister. Yes, and I have prevailed. So she named him Naphtali. She learned from her sister to involve God in her life through prayer and hard work. And what's interesting is she actually impacts her sister's life at this point, as Leah is also, after having a number of children, she's also not having a child again. And so Leah then follows Rachel's lead and invites Zilpah into the home, the other maidservant, Leah's maidservant. And Zilpah has two more sons, Gad and Asher, who they're all equally from the tribes. They're called the tribes of Israel. They're the sons of Jacob. So you see, Rachel's learning from Leah, then Leah's learning from Rachel. And then Leah has two more children. She has Issachar and a daughter, Dinah. And only then does Rachel finally get pregnant. God remembered Rachel and opened her womb, and she has a son. Excuse me for a moment. God remembered Rachel. What does that mean, God remembered? Where did she go? God's everywhere. God creates everything. What does that mean, God remembered? What did God remember? So Rashi explains that God remembered the signs that Rachel gave Leah on her wedding night. And God remembered her compassion. And not only was Rachel compassionate, and not only did she sacrifice herself, but she was silent. She didn't complain. But why does God wait so long? And so the sages tell us that Rachel needed to be at a certain place where she had grown spiritually and deepened herself to become a matriarch of the Jewish people. She had work to do. And only when she was ready, right? So sometimes God gives and says yes, like Leah right away. And sometimes God says, not yet, but soon. And sometimes the answer is no. With Rachel, she was ready. And so she gives birth to Joseph, and Joseph means will add, as if to say that God will give her one more child after. In Joseph's birth, she knows she's going to have another. So I'm just going to get historical for a moment. At this point in the story, okay, Jacob now has 11 sons and one daughter. He's got 4 wives. He's very busy. And he's ready to go. He's had enough of living with his father-in-law. He wants to go, and he wants to go home. He wants to see his father. And he knows he has to face his brother, who after, many years, he's been afraid to go near. And he knows that it's time. He wants to get away from the bad influences of Laban's house. There's idol worshiping, there's trickery, dishonesty in business. And so they leave. And as the family is traveling, Rachel gives birth to her second son, the youngest of the tribes, who is Benjamin. And she dies in childbirth. Tragic. Poor woman. This life seems hard. So Benjamin means the son of my suffering. And he's named that in reference to her difficult labor. And he is actually the only one who was born in the land of Israel. Rachel herself actually named him Ben-Oni, which means son of my affliction, to remember her suffering as a wife of Jacob, a sister to Leah. And Jacob renames him Binyamin, meaning son of my right hand, in the sense that all of our strength, like all of humanity, people's strength, comes from our affliction. Through our struggle is how we get strong. So when Rachel dies, Jacob buries her on the way to Bethlehem, where she dies. She dies, and she's buried in that spot. So now another question comes up. Why is Rachel not buried with the other patriarchs and matriarchs in what is called the cave of Machpelah in Hebron? I have a picture here on the screen. This is Rachel's tomb, Kever Rachel, okay, the grave of Rachel. But why isn't she buried where Abraham and Sarah are buried, where actually Adam and Eve, we are told, are buried, where Isaac and Rebekah will be buried, where Jacob and Leah will be buried? Why is Rachel buried on the spot where she dies? One would think if she was the true Asheret, the true match for Jacob, shouldn't she be buried with her husband? Wasn't she the one who was always supposed to be his partner, his mate, right? They perfected each other. Why is Leah buried with Jacob? And why is Rachel buried at the side of the road? She's buried at the side of the road. What a life of struggle. She's barren. She's the second wife. She dies in childbirth. And she's buried at the side of the road. So what's interesting is her burial plot, the spot where she's buried, is actually quite a strategic spot. Years later, like 1,500 years later, when the Jewish people will be exiled by the Babylonians and Jerusalem will be destroyed, the first temple will be destroyed. And the Babylonians will take the survivors of Jerusalem, the Jews, in chains and march them north and east to Babylon, which today would be like modern day Iraq, Iran area. So years later, as the Jews are going into exile, the Midrash tells us that they pass her grave. And the Midrash tells us that in heaven, all of the patriarchs and matriarchs, this is over 1,000 years later, all of the patriarchs and matriarchs and Moses are begging Hashem in Shemayim, in heaven. They're begging Hashem to have mercy on the Jewish people. Why are you sending them into exile? Help them, help them, help them, help them. They're saying from heaven. But it's Rachel who cries for the Jewish people. And she cries and she cries. This is what the Midrash tells us. And she cries. And through her tears, she gets through to God. It's her tears that God has mercy and compassion on the Jewish people. And in return, because of her mercy, right? So because she was so merciful, like she gave everything up and created space for them. And she took a back seat in her life. And she really struggled. Because of the mercy and compassion that she had, God looked favorably on the Jewish people in her merit. And he has mercy on the children of the tribes of Israel. And this is what we're told is why the first exile lasts only 70 years and that they will return from exile. The only nation to ever survive not one, but 2 exiles. And God, in her merit of her tears and her mercy and her compassion, makes the first exile temporary. Rachel teaches us compassion. She teaches us to love others so much that she doesn't judge others for the good that they have. And she gives of herself in order to avoid hurting others. So she teaches us that when we're merciful to other people, then God will be compassionate towards us. The tears of Rachel are the tears of the mercy of a mother. When the Jews went into exile to Babylon, she cried as a mother who loves her child. She needed to be buried in that spot so they would come by her grave and her tears would like pierce the heavens. The tears caused God to promise a return of the Jews to the land of Israel. And only the tears of a Jewish mother could triumph over our enemies. This is why, even today, Jewish women and men go to Rachel's grave and they cry and they pray and they beg Hashem for children and marriages. There's a famous kind of story of an amazing story of a woman who wanted to get married and was having trouble finding her guy. And she went to Kever Rachel, she went to Rachel's grave to pray to find a mate. And she's praying and she's praying and she's praying. And she leaves the grave. And within 6 months, she gets engaged. She meets a man. She gets engaged. They're set up, whatever it is. And at the wedding, the mother and the mother-in-law, like the Machatonim, are sitting. And they're saying, oh, thank God, my daughter, she was having such a hard time. She was praying and praying and praying. And about 6 months ago, she went to Rachel's grave and she prayed and she cried and she stood there all day crying for a husband. And the mother-in-law said, really? My son also went to Rachel's grave about 6 months ago. That's interesting. Okay, so the wedding continues. They're married. And then one day they're sitting and they're looking through pictures, and the bride says to the groom, look at the pictures when I was praying to meet you, but I didn't know you existed yet. And she's showing pictures of herself that her friends took of her praying at the grave and crying. And in the background of that picture, who was in the background of the picture? Was her groom. On the same day, they both went to the grave to pray for a mate. There's lots of stories like that. So today, this is what people do when they go to visit the grave of Rachel. So Rachel, again, she's on the side of the road on the way out and on the way into Israel. She is the prototype for the Jewish people's redemption. She is the person who understood that if we live in a fragmented world that doesn't seem to make sense, right? She understands how to live with those sacrifices because she understands that although it is a fragmented life and it's a struggle and it's challenging and it's hard, that life is all coming from a place of good, that God is giving good. There is a purpose. We just have to work on ourselves in order to merit seeing the purpose. So she teaches us that out of the fragmentation, we could find unity. You know, it's interesting. Jacob's sons with the 4 women, the 12 tribes of Israel, are the people who create the Jewish nation, right? I've said this before. Abraham and Sarah have one son, Isaac, who continues with the mission. Isaac and Rebekah, one, Jacob, to continue with the mission. Jacob has 12 sons who continue with the mission. And it's those families that go into Egypt and multiply to millions by the time the slavery is over and they come out and go to Mount Sinai and receive the Torah and become a people, like a family of people. When we think about that, it's interesting because the 12 sons, the children of Israel, of Jacob, were born from 4 different women. 4 different women. And Leah is the mother spiritually, where Rachel is the mother physically. Leah becomes the mother of Yehuda, of Judah, her 4th son. And Rachel is, right? And Rachel is the mother of Benjamin. So interesting. These are the kingdoms, by the way. Later on in history, the Jewish nation will divide into 2 kingdoms. And the kingdom that lasts, that most of us, likely 99.9%, are descendants from, is the kingdom of Judah, which was the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Like we see that there's like infused in these tribes, okay, their qualities. But it's interesting, 12 sons from 4 women. Like that doesn't seem unified, right? It's like fragmented. And then we'll see later on the kingdoms will split of the Jewish people. Like there's fragmentation amongst the Jewish people. We're all different. But the reason for that is that so that we can take our differences and come together despite those differences. Like building unity is part of our national DNA. We're going to see, like historically, we see 12 tribes with very different personalities, right? If we think about the Jewish people, we have Ashkenazi, we have Sephardi, we have Hasidim, we have, Mitnagdi, we have like all these different kinds of Jews. But that's really built into our makeup. We were never meant to be one tribe. We're meant to be one family, but we're meant to be a family of different characters that can unify. And in order for us to have real harmony and unity, we have to recognize our differences. This is a Jewish concept, right? Just like an artist takes different colors or different formats and unifies them into a piece of art, right? We have different personalities and character and ways of doing things, but we unify into one people. Rachel understood this, and so she accepted her role in the piece of art, so to speak. She had a love for all Jewish children. And so when the children of Israel were led in chains to Babylon, her tears and her crying and her praying to God is what creates this compassion on our behalf. Rachel is the essence of a Jewish home. She unites all of us. She sees us as one family despite our differences. She doesn't just see them in her lifetime with the 12 sons, who she becomes a mother to, but she sees this for the far-reaching future of the Jewish people. And so why is she buried on the side of the road? Because she is the one who is welcoming us home from exile. We can never fully understand why God sends us pain and suffering. And this is true as individuals and as a nation. You know, our exile, it's now been 2,000 years, is one of great suffering. But we are God's people. And we must know that our pain is coming for the good, as hard as that is to swallow, like as hard of a pill as that is to swallow. And like Rachel, we are tasked to learn from our challenges and to grow through them and to view them as opportunities. This concept is one of our greatest internal struggles, this concept of unity, right? We see this in today's world. We've seen it for my whole lifetime. Jewish unity is the greatest struggle of the Jewish people. And we have one thing that unites us. And unfortunately, that is anti-Semitism. Because others do not see our differences. To the anti-Semites of the world, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. They don't care if you're religious or secular or left-leaning or right-leaning. And unfortunately, if we look at history and today, when we as the Jewish people feel the most threatened from external forces is when we will unify the most. And Rachel understood that our unity is our salvation, and that when we unify, we will return home to Israel and our exile will end. Rachel is the ultimate mother of self-sacrifice. This was her essence. That is why also that the children are Jewish based on the mother. The mother gives life, the essence of the child, and passes this, right, takes the mother's essence and passes it on to their child. Our identity of a Jew comes from the mom. And we learn a lot of lessons from Rachel. We learn the beauty of keeping quiet. You know, it's interesting. When women go for coffee or like we're chatting or we're on the phone, and, sometimes conversations end up with like a friend who's complaining about something in her life, or maybe somebody's going through something horrible, okay? And God forbid we're listening to the challenge, okay? Meaning, God forbid there is a challenge, not that we're listening to it. The friend that is suffering, like let's say there's two people having coffee, okay? One is complaining about something, and the other one's going through like a real hard time. So the friend that is suffering, like, what's your reaction? Okay, maybe we've all been in this situation. Like, you're really struggling and you're listening to complaining about like, oh, it's snowing out, whatever it is. Okay, without judgment. So what is the person who's really suffering inside? What do they want to say to this friend over coffee? They want to say like, are you kidding me? Do you know what I'm dealing with right now? I can't listen to this. So this is what Rachel is teaching us. Channel the power of Rachel. Just silence. Okay? In the story of Rachel, there's one evening where Leah's son brought flowers to his mother, Leah. And they were special flowers to help with getting pregnant. And Rachel says, could I buy them? And Leah looks at her and says, "How dare you take those flowers from my son? They were meant for me." So, what could Rachel have said? She could have said, "Well, you took my husband. I want flowers. You took my husband. You took my role as first wife. Like, give me a flower." But what does Rachel do? She stays quiet. Now, are we supposed to be a doormat like a shmata? No. There's a fine line between being a shmata, a doormat, and being selfless. If we are deeply healthy and have good self-confidence and deep understanding of who we are, we should be able to stay silent and selfless without issue. And Jewish women have these strong values. And one of the things that Rachel teaches us is that she was always on the side of the road. And sometimes as women, we feel like we're on the side. We're not being publicly thanked. We don't get the appreciation we deserve. So Rachel is teaching us that we don't have to be in the limelight to feel accomplished. When we think about building a house again, the foundation is the part that takes the longest. It is the part that has to be perfect. There can't be a crack. Because if the foundation is not perfect, the whole house is going to fall, it's going to be in danger. And this is the role of Jewish women. We have to have a strong foundation. We are the definition of self-sacrifice. We are not only the foundation of our families, but our communities, of our nation. And with these qualities of humility, of knowing when to be silent, knowing selflessness that we learned from Rachel, and all of the qualities we have learned from Sarah and Rivka and Leah, we too, God willing, will become righteous women in our times. I want to thank you so much for joining this series. I hope you enjoyed, and more to come.
That was a great class. Thank you.